As tension hit its peak, a grotesque beast with a massive maw filled with jagged teeth lunged from an unexpected direction. Without warning, the creature struck one of the men in the center, sinking its jaws brutally into the victim's body. Blood gushed in every direction as the man's form was lifted into the air, torn and nearly split in half. The others stood frozen, their naked bodies paralyzed by terror and disbelief. Horror was etched into their faces, while the monstrous entity writhed wildly, revealing more hands and gaping mouths emerging from within its womb-like, hellish form. The ground erupted with debris as the impact shattered the stillness, and one man's expression revealed the moment his mind began to fracture under the weight of this nightmare. The monster surged forward with unstoppable force, tearing a man apart in a spray of thick, dark blood. Its elongated tail lashed out like a barbed whip, striking another body with horrifying velocity. Blood arced through the air, painting the already grim world in fresh death. Elsewhere, a man covered in mud and gore stood frozen, trembling violently, his entire body drenched in the remains of his fallen comrades. His wide eyes began to lose their focus, portraying a mind slipping into trauma and disbelief. His expression emptied, and though his body remained upright, his spirit seemed cast adrift, rejected by the world of the living, overwhelmed by the unspeakable nightmare around him. Terror peaked as one of the survivors watched the creature devour its victim whole. The monster's face was now fully revealed, covered in thick scales, jagged protrusions, and a gaping maw bristling with rows upon rows of razor-sharp teeth. Between those monstrous fangs, a still twitching human body dangled, half-naked and dripping with blood. The scene resembled a vivid depiction of hell, humans reduced to living bait, and the eyeless predator symbolizing the absolute erasure of hope. One man stood in the background, eyes bulging in horror, his body trembling uncontrollably, his grip on reason slipping away. The monster's presence wasn't merely physical, it was the embodiment of total despair. One of the men collapsed onto the muddy ground, trembling as he stared at the creature before him, a monster vastly different from the ones they had encountered before. Its form was larger, more grotesque, with cracked, hardened skin and a lifeless yet menacing face. Beneath it, the limp body of its previous victim still hung between rows of jagged teeth, like a grotesque ornament of the damned. Fear surged through the man's body as he tried to comprehend what had just emerged, something that seemed to crawl straight out of the earth itself, a deeper embodiment of horror. Meanwhile, another man scrambled to rise from a puddle of blood and dirt, his body shaking in panic like a cornered animal. His eyes no longer held courage or resistance, only the primal instinct to survive, surging forward in raw terror. Driven by pure survival instinct, the man sprang to his feet and bolted forward with all his strength, leaving trails of mud and blood behind. Sheer terror twisted his expression, not just from the carnage he had witnessed, but because that very death was now hunting him. Behind him, the monstrous creature gave chase in eerie silence, its large bulbous head and grotesque body moving with unnatural speed. The ground cracked beneath its weight, each step erupting with violent impact. In his panicked vision, the man could see only darkness ahead, an abyss threatening to consume him, as if the world itself had decided to swallow him whole. But behind him, the shadow of the beast grew larger, devouring distance with every stride, offering no room to breathe, let alone to hope. The hunt had begun, and he knew this time, there might be nowhere left to run. Amid frantic breaths and chaotic steps, the man kept running through a jagged, death-like landscape, gradually realizing that the distance between him and the creature wasn't closing. A flicker of hope sparked within, this monster wasn't fast. Its speed didn't match the terror of its appearance. In his mind, a fragile belief began to take shape, he might survive. But that hope was brutally shattered. An unknown object, swift, solid, and merciless, smashed into him from the side with staggering force. His body was flung through the air, his chest bursting open on impact, blood spraying from the violent wound. His eyes widened, not just from pain, but from the bitter truth. The monster wasn't merely pursuing, it was capable of striking from afar. And now, death was within arm's reach. As his body struggled to move, the man turned and witnessed a soul-crushing sight, a massive, lifeless human head rolling across the ground, trailing a thick river of blood behind it. He realized that the scattered limbs and body parts fused into the monster's flesh were remnants of savagely mutilated victims. Panic overtook him as he attempted to crawl away, but the creature had already closed in. Its gaping maw, filled with rows of sharp teeth, began to dominate his field of vision. He could only scream as the looming shadow of death consumed everything before him. The creature's thundering steps grew louder, until it hurled itself forward at terrifying speed, and in an instant, everything descended into chaos. His body could no longer respond. The devastating injuries to his back and chest left him barely dragging himself forward, eyes wide open, staring at a sky that offered no salvation. Behind him, the creature leapt, its maw gaping wider than a human frame, jagged and crooked teeth crowding a black void like the mouth of hell itself. In a single lunge, the monster prepared to swallow him whole. There was no strength left in his arms or legs, only weak fingers clawing at the earth in a final act of desperation. His eyes reflected absolute ruin, not just fear, but an acceptance that this was the end. In a fraction of a second, his vision was overtaken by the enormous maw closing in, and all sound vanished except the fading pulse of his own heartbeat. Within the endless darkness, a survivor's fragmented consciousness slowly began to reassemble. Disjointed thoughts began to take form, accompanied by lingering images of blood, bones, and death. He remembered something strange. The place where they had been attacked was too tidy, too prepared. The ground had been unnaturally smooth, almost as if intentionally arranged. He recalled that the monsters weren't just killing, they were gathering corpses still clothed, as if building something. Visions of suspended bodies, shattered skulls, and mutilated flesh surged through his mind. Gradually, a chilling realization formed: the attack had not been random. It was a deliberate trap, the area likely prepared to lure people in and devour them. He pondered a terrifying possibility: could the monsters be intelligent enough to strategize? Or worse, was something else orchestrating it all? In a void so complete it nearly resembled death, the man's awareness slowly returned. His cold, powerless body began to feel again, his heartbeat, his breath, the pain. But the air wouldn't come. He choked in the emptiness, as though his lungs were trapped in a confined space where life itself was forbidden. Darkness consumed him, suffocating and endless. In panic, he clawed at the unseen walls around him, desperately searching for a way out. As awareness fully bloomed, a terrifying realization surfaced: he wasn't dead, or perhaps he had been resurrected. Then, suddenly, a glimmer of light touched his fingertips, a fragile beacon of hope. With all the strength he had, he scratched toward it, until his body burst through the surface of the earth. He shot upward, coughing violently into a field of grass, his breath ragged. As though rising from a grave, he returned to a world just as horrifying as death itself. With trembling limbs and ragged breath, the man knelt on a patch of grass soaked in dew and blood. He had made it out. Amid chaos and despair, he could still feel the firm ground beneath his hands. A silent relief crept into his chest, yet he quickly realized it was misplaced. His fists clenched tightly, grasping the wild plants around him as if trying to confirm this was real, that he was truly alive. But the truth that followed was far crueler: he had just been killed again. That realization struck like a boulder, erasing whatever fragile sense of relief had dared to surface. He felt the bitter irony of comfort and swallowed it down with self-loathing. In this world, even resurrection was a curse. Death meant nothing, and life offered no salvation. Amid a field of flowers blanketing blood-stained earth and agony, the man slowly lifted his battered body. His breath was labored, his flesh torn, but his mind drifted toward something deeper than fear. He whispered the name Akama with bitter sorrow, recalling someone he had lost and realizing this wasn't the first time he had suffered like this. How many more deaths must he endure? And yet, beyond the despair, a new awareness began to surface. Perhaps it was because of this repetition that he could keep going. In the distance, a great mountain rose, its peak shrouded in mist, yet unmistakably real. He stared at it in silence. That mountain might be a destination, or perhaps a final symbol of hope. If he could survive one more cycle, maybe, just maybe, reaching the summit wasn't just a hollow dream. In this world of unending death, the only salvation might be to keep walking, even if it means dying over and over again. A desperate scream echoed across the field of flowers, shattering the suffocating silence. The protagonist turned in shock, realizing he was not alone. In the distance, several others, naked, disoriented, and terrified, were also rising from the earth. One man screamed in rage and confusion, his body trembling as he tried to grasp the madness of this world. A young woman crouched low amidst the grass, hugging herself tightly, whispering in a broken rhythm, pleading for the noise to stop. This world allowed no time for calm, and all who had reawakened were given only two things: living bodies and reignited trauma. Confusion, anger, and hysteria replaced the stillness, marking the beginning of a new wave of suffering. Rage erupted like wildfire in the chest of the short-haired man who had once screamed in fear. Now, his emotions had morphed into seething anger, and he directed his fury at someone he blamed for their torment. With clenched fists and eyes burning with hatred, he accused her of deception, of never warning them about the monsters. His words turned into a venomous outburst, frustration dripping from every syllable as he screamed into the void, demanding the unseen figure to show herself. Then, from behind the haze of flowers and shadows, emerged a mysterious woman with long flowing hair and a refined eye patch. Her appearance clashed with the hellish world they were in, elegant, composed, and enigmatic. With a calm demeanor and detached tone, she responded to the accusation without flinching, as though truth and lies were nothing more than trifles to her. Shock swept through the newly awakened group as the mysterious woman appeared out of nowhere among them, as if space and time bent to her presence. The men, filled with rage moments ago, stood frozen in confusion. How had she arrived without a trace? But the moment of pause quickly gave way to renewed anger. One of them, the loudest voice so far, lashed out in fury, refusing to accept the explanation or the existence of monsters just because she said so. Yet the woman remained unfazed. Calm and dispassionate, she responded with the poise of someone who had witnessed such reactions countless times before. To her, human despair, anger, and confusion were nothing new. As the man screamed that revival had been a lie from the start, she remained composed, cloaked in an aura of enigmatic certainty. She had never asked them to believe, only warned them. And now, they were simply suffering the consequences. With a cold, calculating gaze, the one-eyed woman looked down upon the group before her, treating their outbursts as childish tantrums. To her, they were spoiled, thinking death could be undone simply because they wished it. She spoke not as a savior, but as a judge in a world that had no mercy. Death, she declared, was a fate bestowed equally upon all living beings. Wasn't it strange, she mused, that those who had already defiled death were still given a sliver of hope? Her words were sharp but devoid of anger, spoken with the certainty of someone who had witnessed countless souls scream without ever learning. In her presence, hope felt like a fragile illusion, a gift not everyone deserved. In the midst of her solemn lecture on death's meaning and the limits of hope, the one-eyed woman was suddenly and violently interrupted. One of the enraged men lunged at her, his rough hands grabbing her body without hesitation or respect. He was no longer listening, driven solely by a volcanic surge of emotion. The woman's gaze remained cold, even as she was manhandled. She didn't resist, didn't flinch. Her reaction wasn't fear, but a quiet surprise, as if curious to witness just how far humans would go in defiling themselves. From a distance, a bystander could only stare and mutter in stunned disbelief. "What are you doing?" The man's act marked the breaking point, where fear and despair twisted into raw violence and utter loss of control. Chaos no longer came from the monsters, but from man himself. In what becomes the darkest moment so far, humanity's most depraved side is laid bare. Consumed by rotting vengeance and an obsession with dominance, the man descends into monstrous intent, crossing every moral line. His face twisted in madness, he utters revolting threats while forcing himself upon the woman he now sees as the source of his rage. There is no logic, no empathy, only hatred wrapped in perverse cruelty. Elsewhere, the protagonist watches in shock and disbelief, his voice rising in protest, helpless and furious. In this world, it is not always the monsters who kill, sometimes, it is humans who are more terrifying. In a blink, the monstrous act was violently and unexpectedly halted. An arm flew through the air, torn from its body with savage force, blood arcing in its wake. The man, moments earlier consumed by madness, now screamed in agony as he realized his arm had been severed. His expression twisted from arrogance to pure horror and confusion. He collapsed, writhing on the ground, blood gushing from his torn shoulder stump. Around him, the other survivors, especially the protagonist and the previously silent girl, watched in utter shock. This world offers no time for repentance. Retribution comes swiftly, brutally, and without warning. For those who cross the line, Lost End does not punish, it tears back mercilessly. With calm and regal steps, the one-eyed woman approached the aftermath of the chaos. Beneath her long flowing hair, her sharp gaze locked onto a grotesque creature floating above, a being composed of swirling, distorted faces, as if made from writhing, screaming souls. The entity seemed poised to interfere, or perhaps to finish what had been interrupted. But before it could act, the woman spoke. Her words were simple, cold, and absolute: "Don't do that." Instantly, the creature recoiled, retreating under her command. Her voice wasn't loud, yet it held enough weight to make even inhuman monsters obey. In this world, power isn't defined by violence alone, it's in those who can make nightmares bow with just a single command.